Hi folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of government employees, government operatives, or even people in NGO that are funded by government taxpayer money, how they act as they see it, the resistance against Hitler, and how they justify this to themselves and to each other and generally. So let's suppose that a government comes in, or any government introduces a law. It could be the Congress or the Parliament or the president or whatever, introduces a law that says that you have to fix the potholes in the road, for example. Now, these people, they believe ideologically that money that goes to potholes disproportionately benefits the oppressor class, the people with social power. The people with the least social power don't use the roads as much. Therefore, money going to fix potholes is really putting in place or strengthening the oppressor class and the structures, the social structures that give the oppressor class their ability to oppress. And thus it is to the disbenefit of the people who are oppressed. And so fixing potholes is really, in an ideological sort of twisted miasma world, is an act of oppression. So they decide that the money that would have gone to fixing potholes, they're going to put it into, say, I don't know, putting more money into transgender affirming care. So let's say that. So, and they think they have a right to do it because the transgender people are the oppressed class. So they're oppressed people. So we as government operatives have a right, the ideological fanatics have a right to do this. We are right in doing it. But you've been ordered by the law and by your supervisor, by your boss to do this. And don't you have to follow the instructions and follow the law? No. The law itself is keeping the oppressor class in power. The law is oppressive. So we are the resistance. We are fighting back against oppression. So we are right in it. We are morally right in doing it. There's nothing wrong in what we're doing. But hold on a minute. It's the law. Your boss has told you to. You've received memos, you've had direct instructions no, but we can ignore all of that. We can ignore all of it because we are morally superior to the people making the laws and everyone else. And we are trying to change society into one of equality and equity. And in that mission, nothing is allowed to stop us because of the moral superiority of that mission. We therefore can ignore any law, ignore any directive from our boss or the head of the organization, and we can go about our work here to create this fantasy nirvana of social equity. So this is effectively the sort of the mental, the psychological business model that they employ in whether they can just ignore orders and laws and so on. So there are various devices that they use to do this, and this is really sort of where I'd like to go on in this essay. So say the Congress passes a law again to fix potholes. I'm using that as a simple example, of course, but and then the head of the department, or maybe the head of your section or some says, okay, well, here's the memorandum. Congress has passed a law to fix potholes, so we need to put resources into that and get the road contractors to fix the potholes and so on. So now you don't want to do that, and you have an informal sort of underground network where you're all sending each other internal messages, or maybe it's a secret messaging system, something like that, and there are various activists, some of whom are quite skilled. There are NGOs involved because there's a round robin conga line of people coming in from the extreme activist NGOs into the government department that you're in, and vice versa. So there's a lot of people think as you do. There's not just one or two. The HR director has been very good at making sure that only activists get jobs in that department. keeping out all others. So anyway, this is so they're saying, okay, well, Congress has passed a law, so we can't be seen to be openly flouting the law. So we have to use various devices to frustrate and stymie and prevent the implementation of this law, because we don't agree with it. It's not moral. It doesn't create the nirvana equity, nirvana outcome that we all support, because of all the oppressive Nazi Hitlers that are everywhere. Hitlers are everywhere, in every closet, under every bed, and around every corner. So we're fighting back against that, and we're right. We're the ones that are in the right. They are all in the wrong. So it's okay. Well, when your boss sends you, so there's little circular messages that go around, little to-dos. Top 10 ways to frustrate something you don't morally agree with, or we don't morally agree with, because they don't operate as one out. They tend to operate in clusters, deep state sort of, sleeper operatives almost. So, first thing you do is you ignore it. You just ignore it and wait for as long as you can. Now, after a certain amount of time, X amount of days or weeks, so your boss is going to back, well, how did you go with those potholes? I didn't get any information back. Oh, yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. I had so many other priorities. I just forgot. Oh, no, isn't that terrible? So straight away, you've burned a few weeks there. You've delayed it for a few weeks. Now, if you'd acted on it straight away, there'd be people out fixing the potholes right now, but you managed to delay it for a few weeks. What you've secretly done is increased the budget for transgender surgery. You've secretly done that, but you haven't told anybody. You've just done it by assigning various, a bit more money to an NGO here, a bit extra money over there, a few extra employees over the other side. You've done it surreptitiously in a particularly clandestine manner, but I would argue sinister, given you're doing it without any sort of directive or requirement to do so, or any law or statute or anything like that. But nonetheless, that's what you've done with the money that would have gone or should have gone, or that legally you were required to allocate the pothole. So you waited 3 weeks. The boss then says, well, hey, look, we spoke about this, and I've sent you a memo. We had a meeting about it. I'll get onto it. And then when the boss approaches again, say, well, I haven't done anything, he'll just say that you had all these other priorities to deal with. Now the boss is getting a little bit annoyed with you and says, hey, you got to do it. I want a report on my desk, by Friday. Okay, so now you're in that. So you can't admit that you're stymieing it and frustrating it and dragging your feet and slow walking it. So you have to find other ways where you appear to be cooperative, but really you're undermining the whole thing. Now, public servants, by the way, get sort of naturally trained in this, not because they want to frustrate or slow walk a policy, simply because they want to avoid accountability. And some of them are very good. I've come across public servants, and some of them have been contracted temporarily into companies I worked for, and they're quite expert at this, and pretending to misunderstand. Oh, I don't understand what you mean. So, and Mickey Mouse turned to some sort yesterday. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're trying to tell me? And so they'll pretend to misunderstand, and they'll create straw man situations to help help along their misunderstanding. So they go through that, and so then they seek clarification, which is, oh, I don't know what you mean. And I've even sort of been in meetings, with these sort of people, and they're not just in the public service. You get them elsewhere. So can you fill the potholes in tomorrow? So what are you saying? What? Sorry, what was that? Can you fill the potholes? I just don't understand what you mean. What is it you want? The pot? Did you say pothole? Is that? So can you fill the potholes in tomorrow? Could you repeat that, please? I just don't know. I'm so confused. I don't understand what you mean. Could you put that in writing, and so on and so. So they'll go around. Could you repeat that? Oh, I've got a cold, and I can't quite hear you. And they'll go around with sort of thing. They'll seek all sorts of clarifications. Can you confirm that this and so okay, you go through that, and then that's another few weeks that or even longer that can be used to. And you do the clarification requests one at a time, because if you do them all at once, then they can be dealt with all at once. So you make sure you do the clarification. And there are, again, action sheets around in the deep state as to how to do this and the process. So, so these action sheets are out there. So you do one request for clarification at a time. That can hold things up. Then you say, well, it's illegal. And again, you've got activists that have done some research on it and say, well, it's illegal because, it doesn't law such and such say that so-and-so and so-and-so. So then, well, I think we should just check on this. Do you think we should set up a committee to investigate that? And you make sure that the committee is stacked with, again, people who are activists. So that'll stymie it for another few months, and on it goes. Now, these are deliberate and willful. Then you announce that, well, we would do the potholes, but the budget's all been spent. We'll have to wait to next year's budget allocation. And really what you've done is you've moved the budget into, or the assigned budget into, again, transgender, whatever. So that you can then, well, okay, no, we've got to wait a few months now before the next budget, and so on. So you can, it's these action sheets on how to frustrate is you can easily hold something up for 12 months. And, if you're good at it, and 2 years. Now, so what also happens is that if they stymie it for long enough, other priorities tend to sort of overtake that one. So that other things come up. So you can then say, well, shouldn't we deal with this priority because it's more urgent? And again, you can then put that to one side and get your boss to say, oh, well, actually, that priority you just mentioned is important. Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. We'll come back to that other one later. And then you just hope it's all forgotten. And again, you go through the same process again, delay, obfuscation, clarification. I'm trying to quietly, get rid of the budget funds that are in there, for the fixing of potholes. So this is how it works. Now, I've come across this in the private sector, but for different reasons. The difference is people, when they're looking at for their own pocketbook, they'll do similar things, but the motivations are different. Ultimately, facts will prevail when people are doing it on the pocketbook for pocketbook reasons, whereas ideologically, the facts don't matter anymore. Once someone moves into an ideological state of mind, the facts are irrelevant. Reality is irrelevant. It doesn't exist. All that exists is the ideology. And the ideology is that we're living in this racist, Hitler-driven hellhole, and Nazis are everywhere, fascists and swastikas hanging out every window. And they have this sort of ideological perception. That's how things are. We're fighting back against that. We are the good people. We are fighting back against that. And we're allowed to do it, and we're permitted to do it. And just because these other people don't do it, it's because they either don't know or because they're Hitlers as well. I mean, wow, hey. So that, again, facts don't matter. So, well, where are these swastikas you talk about? Have you seen any? Well, no, but that doesn't matter. I mean, hey, you must be Hitler by asking that question, and so on it goes. So reality, well, Hitler's been dead for like 140 years or something. What are you talking about? Or Hitler's been dead for, 90 years or something. I mean, he'd be like 150 years old or something today. What are you even talking about? Yeah, but that doesn't really matter. Well, when you're talking about what law, isn't everyone supposed to be equal under the law? Not really. Restorative justice. I mean, look what happened in 1600s when slaves were, well, hold on, but today, yeah, but that doesn't really matter. So facts and reality are just irrelevant. It's all ideological, and their perception of things are just as the ideology dictates, and reality just doesn't come into it. But it's different with, I was hired by an organization it was hemorrhaging money. It was losing a lot of money. And I was hired as the EVP to try and turn it around. I was the compromise. I've mentioned this in other videos. I was the compromise candidate. The board of directors was riven with various factions all trying to nuke each other. And so they all nuked each other's candidates for the EVP role. And I got in as the compromise candidate, simply because all the others had been cancelled out by the factions warring. So I came in that no one opposed me. That was how I got into this job. Probably a little underqualified for it, really. But anyway, the place was going to rack and ruin because everybody had effectively had their hands in the till. They all were friends of each other. They all came from a particular social set around town. They were all each other's friends and cousins and fuck knows what. So I was the outsider in this situation. I was the only one that didn't know anybody. And so I went about as I was having a look, and the expense accounts were just diabolically out of control. There were every Friday, half the employees would go to beachfront, luxury beachfront hotels for a weekend, weekend vacation, all paid for by the company, all under the spurious claim that they were, meeting with important customers or doing some deal or whatever, which of course was just simply nonsense. They were burning through, serious money there. There were all sorts of other scams were going on. The company was giving tax-free loans and interest-free loans to people to go and buy real estate, to remodel it and refurbish the real estate and sell it on for a handsome profit, and then they would just pay that money back but keep the profit. But in some cases they weren't actually paying the money back, or were only paying part of it. So if they ended up, the remodeling was botched, or they didn't sell it for as much as they wanted, they would just shrug their shoulders. Oh well, so the company loaned me $1 million. Well, I'll only pay back 900. I'll keep the other 100 because I wanted that's how much money I wanted to make when I sold it. It's not my fault that it was a market downturn or something. And all these things were going on. And there are people who assumed they should and need take no responsibility. Now, the company had once been quite successful, but they'd lost their direction from a business or commercial point of view, and they had all this very heavy tail of expenses and fraud and corruption and just feather bedding and this sort of thing. Also, the company had created numerous jobs that didn't need to be done, all for people who were just friends of friends. A crony network that was it was the equivalent of affirmative action, but through cronyism rather than race or gender or something. So I started clamping down on the expenses, and the screams and the howls, you could have heard it into another solar system. It was so I had people pounding into my office saying, "You've got no right to stop my weekend beachfront 6-star hotel vacations. How can you do that? What right do you?" And they perceived they had an absolute right to this. It comes back to these people perceiving they have an absolute right in the deep state, an absolute right to engage in their ideological fantasies. These people, in this business, it wasn't ideological. They just thought, well, I'm entitled. I come from the right social end of town. I've got friends in the right places. The company, it's a big company with lots of money flowing around. Why can't I do this? And so, I would sit down factually and say, well, okay, look, here's the balance sheet. Here's the company's books. Here's the accounts. And I'll just go off and round numbers here. The company's selling $100 a month of widgets, but the expenses of running the business are $130 a month. Now, that $30 is being propped up by loans from the bank. The bank is threatening to stop the loans and stop the payments to cover that gap, the losses that the company is making. That is so the whole company is going to end up going under unless we start doing something. Do you understand how dangerous? How this is like the end game. The end game is being played out now. So they would look at it, and some of these people, again, most of them had been to the most expensive, amongst the most expensive private schools. I was the only guy actually there, and the management team had only been to a state school, a government school. So they insisted that okay, well, look, all right, I agree with you, Billy Bob. Now you've showed me the accounts here. I agree with you. Things are not good. So why don't you just get everyone else to suffer the consequences of this, but leave me to do my bit. And I was amazed. I was staggered that people would take that view. they'd sell out their fellow citizens. I think this is part of what the globalization thing was. The globalists came to, the various politicians in the West and said, look, we'll make sure you have waterfront mansions, but everyone else is going to be screwed. Oh, okay. No, that's all right. Yeah, that's okay with me. Because that's what these people were coming to me. Each one of them pretty much came to me and said, look, everyone else can go without. Screw everyone else if you want to, or take away their illicit, ill-gotten benefits, but don't take mine. They can suffer, but just not me. And so I was rather amazed at that. I thought, well, don't you want to sort of, like, you're all in the same boat? Don't you understand? But they had a mentality, there are also things like, there was a guy who was doing his PhD full time at university. It was a 2-year PhD course, and he would turn up in the morning and he would shuffle a few papers around, then he'd head off and go to the university, and then come back at 5 o'clock or something, shuffle a few more papers around, but I've been out doing deals, and I've been out really representing the company and this sort of thing, and as I came along, I realized the guy had done nothing, and he'd got away with this for 18 months or something like that. 18 months had gone by, no one had picked up he wasn't doing anything, and that he was just going to university full time while drawing a salary, so and getting a company vehicle and all this sort of thing. So I was onto this. I jumped onto this and told him, look, you've got away with it. We should be dragging you in court for fraud and so on. But look, you've got away with it for 18 months. So you're going to have to, you're not going to get a salary anymore unless you do some work. Now, if you want to try and commute the last 6 months of your course to doing part-time, like just completing at night, then I'll look the other way on this thing, and you can keep your job. But that's it. He was outraged. How dare you do? I've only got 6 months to go before I get my PhD, and you're insisting that I should actually do work while I'm drawing a salary. Yep, that's exactly what I'm insisting. And the guy went ballistic. And another one, this guy his wife had some multi-layer marketing thing she was doing, and she was hiring out these expensive hotel suites in some of the swankiest hotels in Sydney, and then having them fully catered, very expensive, so she could do her socialite mates and do her multi-layer marketing thing, and this was costing thousands, and he would just write it up on his expense account and hand it in. No one had queried it. So this guy she was getting $1,000 back in the day, $1,000+ a week on his expense account to pay for this multi-layer marketing thing that his wife was doing. I suppose she was doing rather well out of it. I don't know, but she wouldn't have been doing well enough that she could have paid all the catering in the hotel. She wouldn't have done that well out of it. So I discovered this, and I said, no, it ends now, buddy. And, again, I should have done him for fraud or something, but you've been getting away for so long. The procedures have been so slack and so careless. But again, even his wife called me and screaming and raging down the phone. How dare they not be allowed to steal money from the company anymore? So the reason I mention this is because once people get in this mindset that they are justified and it's okay, they're allowed to do it, people around them are doing it, there aren't the procedures, the supervisors aren't sort of clamping down. And once they get into this mindset, they acquire a sense of entitlement that they're allowed to do it, that it's right to do it, it's okay to do it. And if you say they can't or try and stop them, you're the problem, not them. And this is what's happening in the United States as the Trump administration tries to weed out the deep state, that there are these people, that over the years, definitely since Obama and certainly earlier than that, there are whole departments now that will only hire activists, whether they be lawyers in the Department of Justice or wherever. They only hire activists into the role. And these activists, their job, as they see it, is to implement the ideology in this fantasy world that they think exists, and to subvert any attempt to do otherwise. You've been fantastic today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.